In this video with the AnKing, I'm going to show you the best Anki settings, the absolute best settings. Now, why am I making this video again? That's a good question because I've already made one. But I'm gonna go over a couple of reasons why I decided I wanted to do this again, and part of it is because a lot of things have changed. But also, there's a lot of these videos that have come out recently. A lot of these people on YouTube are also sharing their opinions. This video here kind of shows that there's multiple different types of settings here. However, if you go look at most of these people's YouTubes, you'll find that none of them are teaching really about Anki. All of them are influencer profiles, and Anki's popular, so they're making videos about Anki. But none of them have really dedicated. I mean, my entire YouTube channel is about Anki settings. I did make this recommended settings video back a long, long time ago. If you look at the date, it was December 2nd, 2018. And if you go look at when the first video I posted on YouTube was, it is conveniently December 2nd, 2018. I posted about 20 videos at that time. This was one of the first videos I ever shared. And something other interesting here is that I started using Anki on August 11th, 2018. That is when my streak began. And these are not being transmitted like I want it to be. People are not understanding the gist I tried to get out, and these are not my settings, quote unquote. I feel like that's been a little misconstrued. So I want to go a little more into the detail of why this is actually important. Now, older versions of Anki, the settings looked like this, and in newer versions, it now is looking like this. So it's a little bit different change. There was a V2 scheduler. Now there's a V3 scheduler, which changes the settings quite a bit. So I want to touch on that a little bit. Also, Anki was written on SuperMemo 2. That's the algorithm that it uses for spaced repetition. And SuperMemo is now on SuperMemo 18. Big difference here? Maybe. So really the question is, what are the best Anki settings, right? And that's what I wanted to do with this video, is to help you with this. Now, as I go through this video, we do have individualized help via our Patreon or our memberships. I got multiple people that I trust a lot that work with me, and we answer questions on an individualized basis to customize settings for your study outcomes. This is really important. I'm going to get into this. I don't recommend one set of settings. That's just not how things work. There's a lot of different settings that work, and it depends on what you're doing. And as you can see here, I've been using Anki for a long, long time. I've got a streak over 1,200 days now. I've really experimented with multiple different settings. All of the ones I mentioned on the last slide there, I have tried personally. Now, some important terms, very important things you need to know is first the ease. This is like the multiplier that the card is multiplied by every single time you respond. The default is at 2.5 or 250%. This is kind of a measure of the card's mastery, how well you know it. Another term here is the interval, which is how many days between reviews the card is. And then there's a couple other here: learning, graduated steps, graduating interval, which I'm going to get into in a second. And when you're doing Anki, you're going to be presented with 4 buttons here. You can say it's again, hard, good, or easy. And I'm going to go into what happens when you hit each of those buttons. This is really important to understand. But basically, you and your feedback is absolutely key to making the algorithm work well. And if you understand what is going to happen with the button when you push it, then you're going to be able to make the algorithm work better for you. Like I said, there's not like one set of settings that I'm going to recommend here. Okay, so this is the default for Anki. The learning steps are 1 minute and 10 minutes. The graduating interval is 1 day, and the easy interval is 4 days. So I'm going to explain what that means a little bit. So if you have a card that you're going to review now, this is a brand new card. If you hit again on that card, it is going to come back in 1 minute, or what the first learning step is. If you hit hard on that, it's going to be about 5 minutes, and that's because it goes between the 1 minute and the 10 minutes when it's a learning card. The next thing is if you hit good, which is probably what you're going to hit 90% of the time, it's going to go to 10 minutes, which is the first learning step. And I say the first, I know there's 2. The first learning step in the settings is always going to be what goes to when you get the card wrong. So the first actual step in the right direction, assuming you hit good, is 10 minutes here. Now, if you hit easy, it's going to jump to what the easy interval is, which is 4 days. Now, after you have gone through each of the learning steps, which in this case is just 10 minutes, remember 1 minute is meaning you got it again. So just one step here, which is 10 minutes. After you do that, if I were to hit good again on that card, we would no longer be in the learning phase. We would now be graduated, and we would go to the graduating interval, which is 1 day. And you can see I've colored the card green there to make sure so you know it's graduated. And also the easy button, it also graduates the card, so you're now graduated. Now, the reason this is important is because when the card is in learning phase, the ease does not change. It does not change at all in the learning phase. That's absolutely important, okay? Now, these are the Anki default settings. I'm going to go into the settings now that I recommended in my last recommended settings video, which are actually almost the same. I'm going to show you it is basically the same. The only difference here is that your card stays in the learning phase until tomorrow, but otherwise it's the same. So here's the changes here. I made my learning steps 25 minutes on 1 day. My graduating interval is 3 days. My easy interval is still the same. So if we review the card, if we hit again on it, it's going to go to 25 minutes, or that first learning step there. If we hit hard, it's going to go in between the 25 minutes and the 1 day, which ends up being 12 hours. I just end up never hitting hard on a brand new card. Really, you should hit again because you got it wrong, or you should hit good because you got it right. That's generally what you're going to be doing on a new card. So if I hit good, it's going to go to that learning step there, which is 1 day. If I hit easy, it goes to the easy interval, which is 4 days. Now, after I do the 1 day, so tomorrow, if I review the card and I hit good on it again, then it will go to the graduating interval, will graduate and be 3 days. Again, the ease remains the same while this is in the learning phase. So the reason I like this better than the default, even though it basically is the same default settings, because you get the 10 minutes with the default Anki settings. In my case, I can just hit again over and over and over again. I'm not affecting the ease. I'm not affecting anything. I can review that card as many times as I want until I feel comfortable to send it to tomorrow. But even if I get it wrong tomorrow, it's not going to affect the ease. And I like that because I feel like tomorrow is really where you're going to solidify this. If you can study something today and then get it right tomorrow, then you've theoretically solidified that concept. And that's why I like this. Now, I'm going to take this card here, which is the at 1 day, and show you what happens here if we were to answer this differently. So at 1 day, if we were to hit the easy button, it would go to the easy interval. Because the card is still in the learning phase, it's going to go to the easy interval, which is 4 days. If we hit again, it's still in the learning phase, so we're going to go back to 25 minutes, that first learning step. Okay. Now, 3 days later, we get a card. This is now a review card. I've made it green on the screen here. With it being a review card, if you hit again, you're going to go into the relearning steps, which I'll touch on in just a minute here. If you hit hard, what it's going to do is it's going to do 1.2 times the current interval, which in this case is 3 days, and that's what you're going to see it again. And if we hit good, it's going to take the current interval, or 3 days, and it's going to multiply it by the ease, so 250%. So 2.5 times 3, which ends up being a little bit leeway here. Now, something to mention with this good and hard, you can see how I've given 3 to 4 days and 7 to 8 days. There's a little thing that Anki introduces called fuzz, where sometimes it'll be 7 to 8 days. Sometimes it may even send it to 6 or 8. It tries to mix things up a little bit because that actually helps your memory. So don't be shocked if it's a little bit different. That's Anki's fuzz, which is there for a reason. And then if you hit easy, what it's going to do is it's going to do the ease, which is 2.5, times the easy bonus, which is customizable. I'll show you that in a minute, which is 150%, times the interval, which is 3 days. So you'll see it in about 11 days. Now, all of these are multiplied by the interval multiplier, which is another setting you can customize. And that at default is 100%, so it doesn't do anything. But I'll mention that as we get further into the settings and how I actually have tweaked that and messed with it over time. And I think that is something to be aware of. Now, the other thing is that the ease is 250%. This is a brand new card that just graduated, so the ease has not been touched. It's 250% by default unless you change that in the settings, which I would not recommend doing. Now, if you hit again, it's going to decrease the ease to 230% forever. From this point on, the ease is 230%. If you hit hard, it'll 235%, so you're going to decrease by 15. If you hit good, it does not affect the ease at all. It will stay at 2.5. And if you hit easy, it's going to increase at 15%. So if you get a card wrong and the ease goes to 230%, and then later you hit easy on it, it will actually bring the ease back up. So the ease is going to be constantly fluctuating depending on how you answer this. Now, this is an important thing because there are some people who like to hit hard every single time they do a flashcard. This is what we call going into ease hell, because basically your ease is going to go down to like 1.5, and then you're seeing cards way too frequently, and you can't stop it. So you're doing too many cards every day. Okay, now we're going to go into the relearning step. So we did a card that was graduated, and we said it was wrong. So we're going to go into the relearning steps. These are things that we can customize here. These are my settings here, which is the relearning, or actually these Anki default with a little bit of my customization just to show what's going on. So the relearning steps here is 10 minutes. And then the new interval, think of it very similarly to what was the graduating interval, and that is 0.2, and I'll show you how that works. So let's take a card that was an interval of 30 days. We hadn't seen it for a month, and we hit again on it. We forgot it, we got it wrong. Now, after 10 minutes, if we hit again on that, we'll see it again in 10 minutes. So the relearning step is what that card is immediately going to go to after you hit again. So we haven't seen the card for a month. We hit again on it, we're going to see it in 10 minutes. Now, when that pops back up, that's this card here. If we hit again on that, it's going to be 10 minutes again. And it will just keep going through that until we hit something else. If you hit hard, it ends up being about 1.5 times the relearning steps. Again, keeps it in that learning phase, doesn't do anything with it yet. If you hit good, now we're going to go to the new interval, which actually by default is 0. You basically restart the card. So I actually would advocate for increasing the new interval. I use about 20 to 30% a lot of times. So we would do 0.2 times 30 days. So we would now see it in 6 days, and that would be the card's new interval. Now, if we hit easy on it, you're no longer in the relearning steps. So if you have more relearning steps than 10 minutes, it's going to you immediately jump out. So I use this example here. There's only one relearning step of 10 minutes. You can add more relearning steps, and hitting good would just move you through those steps until you've graduated and go to the new interval. Easy will automatically skip all of that and go to the end. And I'm not exactly sure what the algorithm is, to be completely honest. I messed with it quite a bit, and it looks like it just ends up being a little bit longer than what it is with good. Now, the minimum interval here is basically saying what is the minimum interval that this card can be. So in this case, we hit good, and it's 0.2 times 30 days, which equals 6 days. So 6 days is what this card gets scheduled. If our minimum interval was 15 days, then when you hit good, it would, because 6 days is less than 15, the card would go to 15. It would jump to that. I generally just leave the minimum interval at 1 day, but that's just something to be aware of. The ease remains the same during this process because you are in a relearning phase. Anytime you're in the learning or the relearning phase, the ease does not alter. All right. Now we got all sorts of crazy things going on, right? Hopefully you're learning a lot. We have the Anki Palace Mastery course, and we actually have a Butler add-on. We've created an add-on that will automatically apply all the settings that I've been talking about and will continue talking about in this video. It does it all immediately for you, sets it all up just to make your life a lot easier. If you're interested in that, go to this website here. It also includes a course on how to use Anki and everything you need to know to get started with it. We put a lot of time and energy into this, so hopefully that's helpful. With that, though, I'm going to actually go and open Anki now and teach you a little bit about each and every setting. All right. I'm going to slowly go through all of the settings here, try to explain them. There's a set of settings here under Anki, and then Preferences. If you're on a Windows, they'll be under the Tools menu. And you go to Preferences here. There's a bunch of settings here. You might have extra tabs if you have add-ons installed. This is vanilla Anki. I have no add-ons installed right now. And then if you click on the gear icons here and then options, these are also options groups. And I'll make this bigger so you can see there's a lot of different settings here. And actually, if you click here and then hold down the shift key while you're clicking options, it will go to the old settings view. So if you prefer that, you can do that as well, although this will not have the new V3 scheduler stuff. Now, before I start going through all of these, I'm just going to show you a couple of these links. I'm going to put links to all of this in the description of this video so that you can find them quickly. This is a video I have on the Anki Simulator add-on, which is awesome. It shows you if you put in a certain amount of settings, how many cards you'll be reviewing every day and such. But I also use this video to explain what happens if you do certain things. There are some videos out there where they recommend doing about an 80% success rate. I would not recommend that. And I talk about that in this video and actually show you why that is a bad idea. There's a lot of people, like I said, that are influencers and making videos about this stuff, and they don't truly understand it. I have dug into the details and I explain it in this video, so that may be helpful for you. Another thing I'll link here, this is the V3 scheduler. I'm not going to go through all of this in this video, but there's a lot of information here that you could read about and the changes that were made there. There's also, this is a discussion here. This is a blog post that I made a long time ago about the best settings for med school, kind of comparing different settings. Now my view on this has actually changed a little bit since then as well, but that's just a resource. And then another thing I think is really interesting, this is a Reddit post that was made, I mentioned earlier in this video about Super Memo, and it's now on a much later version than the Super Memo 2 that Anki was written or developed with, and still using. But this is an interesting post about Super Memo and why Super Memo actually is not as nice as you'd think. So even though Anki's on an older version of Super Memo, it actually is doing pretty well, and the algorithm works really well. So just a couple resources for you to dig into that I think will be helpful. I'm going to go into the preferences first, and I'll show you those settings, and then we'll go into the other ones. So in the preferences here, most of these are very self-explanatory. For example, the language, the video driver, obviously this is not recommended. So if you're having weird issues with graphics and stuff, you can try switching that. Most of these make perfect sense. Like if you want to show the play button on cards that have audio, it will actually show a button that looks like play, so you can click it to play the audio. Generally, I think it's good to have that. If you want to interrupt the current audio when you're answering, so if you have a question and it's reading the audio and then you flip to the back of the card, typically you want it to stop, but maybe you might not. If you want to paste images as PNGs, those are generally larger files, so I don't do that. Stripping the formatting, if you want to strip the formatting off of everything instead of making it look weird, this is kind of nice. It's handy to toggle on and off depending on when you need it, when you don't. I'm in night mode right now, but you can turn that on and off. When you're adding cards, for example, it'll just go to my default deck here, or whatever the current deck is. You can see the current deck is highlighted, kind of that darker color here. That means that's the current deck. But you can also change on the note type if you prefer, if you have different note. I combine my note types into each deck, so it doesn't make sense for me, but it might for you. And then the voice recording driver, so if things are working oddly, sometimes on Windows or Linux or Mac, things work different, so you can tweak that if you're finding you're having audio problems. But otherwise, I leave it at the default. The interface size, and then this thing here, the default search text. So basically, this is what's going to happen when we go into the browser. So if I go into the browser, you can see that nothing pulls up here in that, and I'll make it a little bigger just for easy's sake. We'll go back into the preferences. So if I type in here and do is new, like I want to see new cards only, and close that, open the browser, you can see is new is now the default text. So if you have a deck you always want to open to or something like that, you can tweak this setting here. I'll delete that for now. So the scheduling tab, this is pretty important. This is where a lot of people get confused. So if you want the next review time above the answer buttons, so when you're actually in the reviewer here studying and you want these times here, if you want those there, you would check that. If you don't want them there, you just want to hit good, hard, or easy and have no idea when it's coming next, go for it. I prefer to know when things are happening. Like I said, Anki's a tool. You want to make it work for you. So generally, if I see that it's 45 days and I feel like I definitely don't know it that well, then I'll hit harder again. Remaining card count during the review. So you can also see when we go in here and space, you can see that the cards are down here at the bottom. If you don't want to know how many cards you have left, then you can uncheck this. This is really required just for Anki Droid, otherwise I wouldn't use it. And then the V3 scheduler, which is awesome. And I'll go into that a little bit, but you can see it's checked right now. Let me uncheck it and I'll show you. We'll go into the deck here. I'll go options. You can see that this goes new cards, lapses, timer. That's all that's here on the window. If I go Anki and then preferences and oops, accidentally did that. Let's go scheduling and I turn on the V3 scheduler. There we go. Go back into the settings here. Now you can see that we've added this display order section, which is really handy. I like it. I think the V3 scheduler is probably worth doing. It has a bunch of other perks as well. Now these are the important things. The next day starts at. That means we're on today. So if I reviewed this card and sent it to tomorrow, it would show up tomorrow. But when does tomorrow start? Does it start at midnight? Does it start at 1 a.m., 2 a.m.? So if you're like me and you end up doing cards very late at night, sometimes I generally leave it at the default of 4. Now the learn ahead limit. Now we talked about earlier in this video, if you hit again and it has to wait 10 minutes or wait 25 minutes to show up, it will actually wait 25 minutes before it shows up. But if you're waiting for it and the learn ahead limit is set to 90 minutes, it's saying you can learn ahead 90 minutes, so it will show right back up. So I generally leave this at 0. And then when I at the end of the day, I'm trying to just finish stuff up very quickly. Sometimes I'll change it since my again button is 25 minutes. Sometimes I'll change it to 23 or 24 just to kind of hurry things up. And then the time box time limit basically means if you're reviewing cards, in this case for 1 minute, after 1 minute, we'll have a little pop up and say, hey, you're done. It's kind of meant to be a Pomodoro add-on sort of thing. Although I'll be honest, the Pomodoro add-on we have works quite a bit better. So I would recommend that. You can get it through our memberships. Quick showcase of this add-on just so you know what it's like. This is a Pomodoro add-on, or the study timer add-on here that we designed. Uses the Pomodoro technique, but basically you can click these buttons here. If you click the 25-minute button, then after it finishes, it will automatically start the 5-minute and then start the 25-minute, like a true Pomodoro setting here. But you can see that there's a pie and this. You can actually have a progress bar if you really want to. There's a menu here for it. In the settings and all the different things. You can change all the colors, shortcuts, whatever, to your heart consent. You can change what the alert is when your time is up, and what all the timers are. Very customizable, but just something fun that helps you studying. The network here, this is what you want to sync. I think generally I would leave this and just not touch it. The only thing that's interesting here is on media sync force changes in one direction. Every now and then you'll make certain changes to this, and you want to make sure that you force that change to all of your devices if you're using mobile. Then you can force sync in one direction, and when you click sync, it will give you the option and say, do you want to upload or download? And if you do that and you want to upload things to the internet, then on all your other devices, you would sync and click download after you've done that. I don't use it very often, but it's just nice to know that it's there. And then backups, this is how many backups it will keep. I generally keep 50, but you can keep more if you want. It's just if you ever needed to revert to it. So that's the settings in the preferences. Now let's go into the settings here under options, and we have a lot of settings to talk about. Now there are, you can see there's 2 different settings here. There's the default settings and the relearning example. Now if I go into the siblings here and I click options, I can change this to the relearning example and click save. And now this deck is the relearning example. We go back into here, you can see this is now used by 3 decks and this is used by 1. Now this is important because if you create a new one, which you can by going here, add preset, or you can clone, whatever you want. If I go here and change this to relearning or click save, now you can see if I go into this sub deck, this one is still the default deck, but the head deck is not. And this is important. A lot of people get this confused and send me emails asking questions about why their settings aren't working right. Well, the sub decks are still going to follow the sub deck settings, but the head deck is in this new one. So if you wanted to switch everything over, you would click here, and then you would go here and you would do save to all subdecks, and it would make it so that all the subdecks and the head deck share the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, save it, and we'll go through and talk about each of these. Now the daily limits. This is how many new cards you want to show per day. And a lot of people see my last video and they see that I recommended going to here and doing 99999. And I just put it at whatever the maximum is. Now, this is also important here, what is popping up here saying. So I'm going to go ahead and switch it. But this is how many reviews per day you should do. I absolutely think your reviews per day should be 9,999. You should do every review that is due that day. Otherwise, Anki doesn't work. The algorithm doesn't work. With the new cards per day, it's different. It depends on what you're doing. If you're the type of person who has downloaded a language deck and you want to do 10 new cards a day, then I would set this to 10 new cards a day. And I have done that with my language decks. I have a deck to learn Mandarin Chinese. That's what I'm doing, 10 new cards a day. If you're a medical student and you're using a pre-made deck of 30,000 flashcards and you've suspended all of those cards and you're going to unsuspend cards on certain days and you want to do all the cards that you've unsuspended, I would set that as high as you can because you're going to control the amount of new cards you do with unsuspending things. The same applies if you want to add cards today and then review those cards today. You would set it to this because every card that you add is the card you want to do, and you basically just want to do all the ones you added. So hopefully that makes sense. There is no right answer here. Now the learning steps, I showed you the defaults and not. A lot of people recommend adding extra learning steps. So they'll do 25 minutes, then 1 day, then 3 days, then some people will even do 7 days and make the graduating interval 15 and make the easy interval like 20. I would not recommend this. I have tried it personally. You're welcome to do that if you want to. I think it is much, much, much simpler to do this. And the reason is some people get so scared of ease hell and getting to the point where they just are doing so many cards that they don't want to ever touch the ease. That's just not a good idea. You want to touch the ease. The cards that are easy for you, you want to see less often. You want the ease to increase. The cards that you are hard for you and you hit again on or you hit hard on, you want to see more often. The whole point of the algorithm is to separate out things depending on how difficult they are. So the things that are more difficult, you see more often. The things that are less difficult, you see less often. And like I said earlier, I think if you can study something today and then cohesively explain it or answer the flashcard tomorrow, generally you've gotten a pretty good sense of it, and at that point then you would want to then you would want to do affect the ease. Now I do see some people that like to add this in here, 25 minutes 1 day, to force themselves to review a card twice on the first day. So they'll do the card and then in 25 minutes and then in 1 day. For me, I think it's easier to just do this because I can just hit again over and over and over again, which is still 25 minutes, and it'll come back after 25 minutes. Like you can do it as many times as you want. You're not going to affect the ease. So I think that the learning steps being simple is easier. I don't have research to back this up, but I have 3.5 years of experience with Anki, and I feel like this works quite a bit better for most people. It's far less complicated and actually ends up to being less cards in the long run. You will review cards more when they're newer, but that's advantageous because then when they're 6 months out, you still remember them well. The insertion order here, also I never mentioned this, you can hover over all of these, which is kind of cool, and get a good explanation of what's going on. So you can basically decide like how do you want to see new cards. Do you want to see them based off of the oldest ones, so the card you made earlier today and not the card you just barely made, or do you want it to be totally random? And you can do whatever you want with that. Now, the relearning steps we talked about already in the video, and I've got this set to 10 minutes. You can also, some people will set it 10 minutes and then 1 day. And by the way, if you're using the old settings view, you would have to actually do 1440 minutes just because it can't deal with days. So you got to convert days to minutes. And that's why you'll see that a lot of places. But the newer ones are kind of nice. You can also do hours if you wanted to. But 10 minutes and then 1 day. I could also reset this, which is kind of cool. But this so that's your steps, and you can set those. We talked about those already we talked about the minimum interval already. This is set to 20 here. I actually would set it to 1. This one I actually, in my settings, I have it set to 30. Like I said, there is no right or wrong answer. I don't want you to feel like what I'm saying is absolute. For leash threshold, this means how many times you've hit again on a card when it was graduated. So a graduated card that you hit again on is considered a leech, or you forgot it. This is saying if you hit it 8 times, it's going to tag the card with leech. I don't think there's ever a reason where you should say suspend, because that means you're having a hard time with that card. You don't want to suspend it and get rid of it. You want to tag it. And I actually changed mine to 4 because if I've missed a card 4 times, I want to know about it. That's just me and personal preference. Now, the display order, this is V3 only. I'm going to come back to it in a little minute. We'll go through the rest of these. The timer, this means the maximum answer seconds. So when you go and answer a card, you can see here it says studied 0 cards in 0 seconds. It's going to keep track of how many seconds per card it takes you to answer. If you set the maximum answer seconds to 60 seconds, that means if you've been looking at a card for 60 seconds, it's going to stop counting. At that point, it will just say that it was 60 seconds. It's going to assume that you stepped away from your computer. Now, for me, I actually set this down to 30 because I never take more than 30 seconds to answer a flashcard. And if I am taking more than 30 seconds, it's probably because I got distracted with an email or something. You can do the answer timer on the screen. Most people find it distracting and just prefer to leave it off. Now, burying the siblings. This is helpful. So you can bury new siblings. You can also bury review siblings. I like to have both of these on, and I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to click save. FYI, I've done this many times. If you close this, it will not save your settings. You have to click the save button. Click the save button. These are siblings. So I'm actually going to go to the browser under the siblings deck here. Now you can see this is sibling 1 and sibling 2. This is a closed card, and you can see this is C1 and this is C2. And so those are siblings because they are the same note, different card. And I'm going to go in and show you what happens with each of them. So Here we go. We are not burying the new siblings. These are new cards. So if I go in here, I'm going to study now, show answer, we'll hit good, and you can see the second one now comes up. We have 2 cards. I'm going to undo that and come back out and show you again what happens if I turn this on. Click save. Now if we come here, study now, we're going to review this card and hit good. And now it says I have no cards to review. That's because the second sibling got buried until tomorrow. So it kind of helps separate out sibling cards. And I think that's very helpful. I definitely recommend keeping it on unless, there are definitely unique instances when you wouldn't. There's times when I've turned that off occasionally, but knowing what it is and how to use it is important. The audio, I think these are pretty self-explanatory, just not playing the audio automatically, making you have to click the button or there's a keyboard shortcut. Skipping the question when replaying the answer, I feel like is generally quite helpful, but again, just depends on you. And now we're going to get into the advanced here. This is the fun part. So the maximum interval, there's a huge debate out there. I think I put mine at 180 days on my original video, saying after 6 months, that's the maximum. So when the interval gets to 6 months, and then when I hit good on it again, it's going to go up to 6 months. I hit good on it again, it goes to 6 months because that's the maximum. It never gets more than that. And I felt like as a medical student, that would be good for me because I want to constantly be seeing things. I have changed my view on this. If you're in medical school, I think maybe I would probably do 365 and do a year. But generally, I feel like I actually have been moved to the direction of I would not set a maximum interval. Anki is going to work better if you really try and study each card hard. And if it gets sent out 2 years, it gets sent out 2 years. My biggest regret in medical school was suspending a lot of cards when I was done with things because I had a lot. I was doing, an hour of flashcards a day. I wish I would have not set the maximum interval and just kept my flashcards going instead. I would have had less cards to do, and I would have kept that in my brain. So just something to keep in mind, but they're definitely not a right answer. Just understand what this does and tweak it for your use. The starting ease here, actually, I should go back to the maximum interval. I would not recommend doing anything less than 180 days. There are some people that do 30 days or 90 days. I absolutely would not recommend that. It's not going to be helpful for you. Okay, starting ease we talked about. You can choose this 250% or 2.5 here. I would not touch this. I think the Super Memo 2 algorithm is pretty good, and that's a great place to start. But if you want to mess with it, then you know what it does. The easy bonus, which is if you hit easy, it's going to send the card out further. I found that 1.3 wasn't sending it out quite far enough, and I preferred, and I opened it up and I did 1.5. I found that worked pretty well for me. I still think that works pretty well, but just depends on how you're using the easy button, how often you're using it, what you want to do. Just remember, when you hit easy, it does increase the ease, so you will forever see it less often. The interval modifier. I talked about this before. It by default doesn't do anything because it's 1. If you feel like you need to see cards quite a bit more frequently, you could change this to 0.9. It's going to make it so everything is more frequently. Now, you may do this. Certain language cards or things like that where it's just cold memorization and you don't have something to tie it to, it may be better to do 0.9. When I was a medical student, I had it for 1 for my first 2 years because I felt like that was helpful and it was just fine. But as I got into my 3rd and 4th years, most of my flashcards were built on more of an understanding, which I had, and I didn't need to see them as frequently. So I actually changed this to 1.4, and I felt like that was too much. I started getting cards wrong too often. And then I tweaked it and messed around with it quite a bit. Changed it to 1.2, and I was pretty happy there. But like I say, my language cards were at 0.9. My medical cards were at 1.2, and other medical cards were at 1. There is no right answer here. You should not be using the same interval modifier for everything that you're studying. You should be tweaking it and playing with it. But generally what I would recommend is go between 0.9 and 1.1. That's generally a safe area. Do that and see, am I getting all, if you're at 0.9 and you're getting every single card right, you're never getting a card wrong, you're probably you're seeing them too often, and you should increase that interval modifier. If you're at 1.4 and you're like me and you start getting cards wrong a lot more often than you're used to, you fall into the 80 to 90% correct range, then that's not where you want to be. So I lowered it a little bit until I generally like to shoot for the 90 to 95% success rate. And that's where I found like I'm pretty happy. Now the hard interval, we talked about this, is what it gets multiplied by. It's just 1.2 times current interval. The ease doesn't factor into the hard equation. I think 1.2 works really well. I generally recommend people don't mess with it because when you hit hard, you are decreasing the ease. And ideally, you want to discourage yourself from hitting hard unless a card is truly hard because you don't want to keep decreasing the ease. I think 1.2 works pretty well. And then the new interval we talked about, that's related to kind of the lapses and what happens after you've done the relearning steps. It's going to go to the new interval. I think 0 is not good at all. I would definitely change this. And I found I'm pretty happy medium at 0.2. I do know a lot of people that have done 0.3 or 0.4 and been pretty happy with it. That's generally about as high as I would go. But again, you play with it and see what you like. The custom scheduling here, I wouldn't mess with unless you really know what you're doing. I think it says that here. Use it at your own risk. It's a fairly new feature. I wouldn't mess with it at this time. And that's most of the settings. So now I'm actually going to go over the display order here. This is the V3 scheduler, and it is a little confusing. But basically what happened, at least in older versions of Anki, is when you click on the head deck, it would do all cards from this deck, then it would do all cards from this deck, and it didn't shuffle them all in the head deck. So it was kind of annoying because you might have multiple subdecks that you wanted to randomize, and you weren't able to do that. In the past, there was a Hoochie add-on, which was really popular. Another way you can do this is actually to click on the deck and then do tools and create a filtered deck from that deck. So you can see it is due, and I can randomize it and set this to 900, 999, and then just do all cards from that deck random. And that does work pretty well. In fact, I think it works a little better in some instances. But I have a video on custom filtered decks. If you are unfamiliar with them, they're very powerful and handy to use. But basically, that's kind of how that goes. So that's what these settings here are for. So it's saying new card gather order. Do you want to gather them from the deck, or do you want to do ascending or descending position? So I'm going to go into the browser and show you what the ascending and descending position is. So if we click on the default deck, you can see here's the cards. And this is the due column, which if I reviewed a card, I'm going to go review one of these just so you can see what it does. If I click on the siblings deck, you can see there's a date here. So there actually is a review, and this was buried. That's what the parentheses are for there. This was buried, and so it's a new card. If we go into the default deck, you can see these are all new cards. Now this is 0, 1, and 2. That's the order you will see them if you do ascending position, or if you do descending, you would do 2, 1, and 0. And you can actually tweak these from here. You can go to cards and reposition. For example, that one's at 0. So if I wanted to reposition that card to 30, if you have a lot of cards, I can click OK, and you'll see that changes to 30. So you can actually tweak them. You can select all of them cards and reposition, and you can just start it at 0 and it will step by 1. It'll go 0, 1, 2, 3. You can randomize it, do whatever you want. You can see it now randomizes them back to 0, 1, 2. And that's how the position works. Let's go back into the settings here. All right, so that's we're gathering and how you want to gather. Do you want to gather from the decks or the positions? And then how do you want to sort them? Do you want to randomize it? Do you want them to sort in descending and ascending position, meaning that's how you see them? Do you want it to gather or sort the cards by card template? So you'll see all cards with a certain card template, and then you'll see all cards with another card template, but within that they'll be random. And these are pretty helpful. You can get into the Anki manual if you feel like these are unclear and you're not sure what to do. I feel like most people generally just want to randomize their reviews, but not always. When I'm doing new cards, a lot of times I like to do them in order. So I actually would do ascending position. But it, again, depends on what you're doing and how you want to study. For new card in review order, that means when you have new cards and reviews, do you want to do the new cards first? Do you want to do the review cards first? Or do you want to mix them? I generally like to do my reviews first. So I would show my new cards after the reviews. That's personal preference, totally up to you. There's not a right answer here. And then the interday learning cards, meaning if you got cards wrong and they're now in that learning phase and that kind of thing, what do you want to do? Do you want to do all of your reviews first and then the learning cards? Do you want to do the learning cards and then the reviews, whatever? I felt like I generally wanted to do the learning cards first because those are the harder cards. Those are the ones I need to focus on more. So I would show them before reviews. Again, personal preference. And then review cards sort order. When you have review cards, how do you want to sort them? And people do different things, and you can set it up whatever you want. So due date, meaning when they're due. So this will, if you have cards that are overdue from yesterday that you didn't do today, then it will do them first and then randomize it. I think these are kind of fun. The ascending and descending ease. I think ascending ease is kind of fun because then you see your harder cards first. So when you have more mental stamina to deal with them, then you do them first. But again, you can kind of do this and play with it however you want. So those are my recommended settings, quote unquote, right? This is not, if you look at this, this is not what I have on every single one of my decks. It definitely is not. And you need to tweak these and make them work for the setting that you are in. This is really, really important. So yeah. And then lastly, before I end this video, I want to talk about an add-on that will make it so that with ease hell and tweaking your ease and how to avoid that, there's an add-on I feel like that's pretty helpful, and I want to mention that. Okay, this secret add-on I feel like that helps keep us out of ease hell is the straight reward add-on. Go over here. You can see this is what the add-on looks like on Anki web. You can see the code here if you want to download it. And it's a really cool add-on. I'm not going to go into the exact specifics of the formula here, but they go through everything. You can see what the actual formula is and how it calculates. So I'll go through it very briefly. But it works in the background. You never really have to do anything. So if you go here, it's only in the old options at the moment. So you'd hold down Shift and then click Options here. It pops up, and now you can see there's a Rewards tab. This is the straight rewards. And this is what it does. So it is going to start at ease 130%. So anything with an ease that is 130% or higher, which 130% is as low as Anki lets it go. So basically any card. If you get it right 2 times in a row, then it's going to add a certain percentage, and that's where I said this formula comes into play. But it's going to add a certain percentage to the card and make the ease go up. So rather than having to hit easy, if you hit again on a card multiple times, so that the ease is now 180%. But now you feel kind of confident with the topic, you would have to hit easy on it to bring the ease back up. But maybe you don't quite feel ready to hit easy, but you would love for the ease to slowly creep up. That's what this add-on does. And it's going to slowly add a little bit of ease every time you get it correct in a row. And it'll stop at 250%. After 250%, it stops adding stuff. Now, I actually changed this and put it to 230%. The reason being, I feel like if a card was difficult enough that I have gotten the ease way low, now even if I'm now getting it right over and over and over again, I still probably want to see that more often than a usual card. So I put the stop at ease a little bit lower, but otherwise, this is really all you need to do. I don't think you need to tweak it that much. It just kind of works in the background and helps keep it so that your ease doesn't get too low, at least not too dramatically. Okay, and the last thing here, the Butler add-on. I mentioned this earlier. If you're interested in our Anki Mastery course, we have this add-on. It's called the Anki Butler. It will configure all of your settings. We'll also install over 50 add-ons just automatically in the blink of an eye. So if I go here, I'll just to give you a quick example, here's my options. You can see this is the default settings here. Rather than having to go through and change them all, you just go here, configure settings. It says, do you want to do this? I say yes, a little pop-up. And now when I go back in and click options, it will automatically have changed everything to settings that we feel like are a little more recommended. Now, of course, you can still tweak them further. It also changes the preferences and enables a lot of things in that as well. So really powerful add-on. Also installs your add-on, all of other add-ons that are really helpful. And the money that we gain from this course, we put back into the community and developing add-ons and other things that will be helpful for you. So hopefully this video was helpful for you. I tried to share all of the things that I have learned over the last few years that make Anki so wonderful and make it such a powerful tool. So the more you learn about this, the better you will be with Anki and the more efficient your studying will be. Thanks for learning with the AnKing. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel here, as well as follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Patreon. That is at AnKingMed. Also, feel free to reach out via email or check out our website, ankingmed.com, for more tips and tricks.